West Virginia Secondary School Activities Commission named Wayne Ryan as its next executive director. Wayne currently serves as Associate Executive Director of the WVSSAC, according to the news release. He was the Assistant Director from 2016 to 2023. WVSSAC Board of Directors President Trent Sherman says they are confident in Wayne's background and his commitment to education-based athletics. Wayne was a multi-sport athlete and graduated from West Virginia University with a master's in communications. He spent 30 years in Summers County as a coach, teacher, athletic director, and assistant principal. While there, he led his girls basketball team to 6 state championships. He was named West Virginia State Coach of the Year in 2010 and West Virginia Athletic Director of the Year in 2015 by the West Virginia Sports Writers Association. Wayne will start as executive director on July 1st following the retirement of current executive director David Price.